What is happening, everybody? So, the GT500. I want to give my thoughts on that car, but before I can really dive into the GT500 that is to be released, I want to talk about the legacy of the GT500, just in terms of how that car fits into the pony car wars, and really how it fits into an enthusiast's point of view. So let's take a trip back in time to roughly 2005. Back then, there was no other supercharged V8 platform as an American car except for the Terminator Cobra and the Lightning. Now, the Terminator Cobra, as a predecessor to the GT500, you have to admit that the GT500 would have some pretty big shoes to fill. But when Ford upped the ante and took displacement from 4.6 liters to 5.4 with the S197 platform, that's when things got real interesting. Yeah, the S197 was a little bit heavier, but it would allow or accommodate the 5.4 liter dual overhead cam platform that would become a legend in terms of performance when referenced to that GT500. And what that car brought to the table was something that the automotive landscape in the United States hadn't seen for about 25 years or so, which is big block horsepower coupled with big block torque. And if you don't understand what that means, think of it like this. The allure of having a big block isn't necessarily having all this horsepower on the top end. Big blocks are really good at making a bunch of power really low in the RPM range. Mid-range is also very good, but the shining star in a big block's performance is partial throttle tip-in torque. That is where big blocks shine. It's also where Roots superchargers shine, especially when coupled with a long stroke 5.4 liter with heads that flow ungodly numbers, at least in terms of 2-valve versus 4-valve, which the 5.4 has. When it was released, it was making roughly 500 foot-pounds of torque and 500 horsepower. And that is something that, again, since enthusiasts hadn't had a chance to experience it, people went nuts over that car. And rightfully so. Now, granted, the GT500 then wasn't quite as balanced as, say, a Viper, if you want to call that balanced, or a Z06 of the same time period. But the fact remains that if you take, I don't know, a driver of, let's say, a 2004 Z06 and put him behind the wheel of a GT500, that driver is going to come back with nothing but a grin stretched from ear to ear. There is something overwhelmingly intoxicating about tip-in torque that rivals what a normal V8 will produce at full throttle at peak torque. And that, again, is why those cars are so special. They offer a driving experience that you just really can't put into words. It's something that has to be experienced to be understood. And because of that, that particular car set itself so far in a way ahead of the game, just in terms of being a true muscle car, than anything else that had been produced up to that point. And I say a true muscle car because the GT500 still had a solid rear axle. It was the last of the throwbacks to old technology coupled with a new technology power plant. The only downside, if you want to call it a downside, to the GT500 then was that it was never optioned with an automatic transmission. And that is a shame, because one thing Root superchargers love is load. The torque hit is amazing. And if you couple that with a torque converter and a good automatic transmission, you are well on your way to kicking all kinds of ass in a drag strip. But the GT500 was never really meant to be a drag racer, which is a shame. But that car is probably one of the absolute most fun driver cars that you could have. I wouldn't necessarily say it would be great on back roads, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it's great on drag strips, although there's plenty of them running really great times. But it's the overall driving experience. the ability to have the thing in second or even third gear and not even have to mat the throttle, just do a real quick roll on to about 3/4 throttle and get a little bit of tire haze out of it. I mean, those cars are unbelievably fun. And they also come with another upside. They are unimaginably easy to make tons of power with. I mean, when I say that it is basically a credit card and a long weekend away from being a 750 horsepower car, that's assuming that you don't work on Sunday. A pulley swap, a tune, exhaust, just some small work to it. I kid you not, and for a lot less money than you might think. You can go from 500 or later versions 540 horsepower to well over 700 horsepower, more or less within the span of just a few hours of working on the thing. So it is a legend not only because of what it offered at a time when no other manufacturer was offering those types of performance, or at least not that type of a performance feel. It also offered the enthusiast an opportunity to either leave it stock and enjoy it as is, which it was pretty good stock already, but to be able to be in his garage and wrench on it a little bit and have immediate power increases. Pretty impressive all the way around. But again, it suffered because it was never optioned with that automatic transmission. Now, I don't really want to start playing the comparison game because I want to focus on the GT500, but as we all know, the ZL1, it was optioned with an automatic, and although I don't know if that dampened any sales, because let's face it, the Shelby name carries a whole lot more weight than ZL1 does with some Chevy guys. Yeah, the option was just never there, so there's no ability to have a direct comparison between an automatic GT500 and an automatic ZL1. But what I can tell you is this: if you've never driven a GT500 or you've never driven a ZL1, I can tell you this: the driving experience is something that you'll never forget. It is addictive, to say the least. Now, let's talk about that new GT500. That GT500 has some seriously large shoes to fill. And I want to talk about that GT500 just versus basically like a garden variety older GT500. I really don't want to talk about the one-off like the Super Snake or some of the other higher horsepower offerings that you could get, because those dollar signs started to get really big. But just keep this in mind: there was a time when you could option a GT500 with over 900 horsepower in street form. Now, yeah, it would be a one-off deal that you would have to send back through Shelby or something like that. But the fact is, yeah, those numbers were pretty easy to get back then. And I can only assume that the new power plant will be at least as capable. But my only real question is, will it be offered with an automatic? Will we be able to compare a GT500 with an automatic versus a ZL1 with an automatic? Will it be as good as the ZL1, and will it offer up the same type of driving experience, which is far and away better than what the competition has to offer? Now, I can only assume it'll come in well over 650 or 680 horsepower where the ZL1 is currently sitting. I just really hope that car comes out not only with more than 680, I want to see it more like 780 or even 800, because for the GT500 to take its place back from Mopar and from really GM right now with the ZL1, it's going to have to do far and away better than what the current offerings are allowing. And it's going to have to do all of that for a price that is at least somewhat comparable to its competition. I'm not sure that it'll be able to do that. But here's another twist to it. It's not like the GT350 is any slouch, but the GT is on a whole different plane when it comes to modability. It's no secret. You can take a base model GT, put a Roush Stage 3 supercharger on it, have a different tune, have all the other bits and shit that you need to make 670 or 700 plus horsepower, and that car is going to cost you somewhere around $45,000. you start comparing dollar for horsepower, or rather horsepower for dollar in that respect, yeah, it starts to make that GT500 not necessarily look so special. So it's got to at least do better than the best aftermarket offering will offer, like a Roush offering would offer on the current Coyote platform. Fingers crossed. I can't wait for that car to get released, if ever, but I remember the GT500s very fondly, and I'm kind of happy that Mopar is more or less still kind of sitting on top in terms of the horsepower wars and muscle car look, feel, and all of that. I don't know, there's a part of me that just wants to see the GT500 kick it up a notch, to bring everybody else to its level in the same way that it did over 10 years ago. So that's it on this one. Post up your comments. Let me know what you think. And if you've got a GT500, I'd love to hear some stories about your car. I've got a ton of stories of my own about those cars, and Lightnings too, by the way. But at any rate, I'll save those for another time. Hope you guys are having a great one. That's a wrap. Adios.